started, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Scott Wiener, who is the director of our Office of Markets and Innovation here at the Department of Public Service. Scott's going to offer us some opening remarks, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. We've got a lot to cover. So with that, Scott?
Thank you, Peter. I want to welcome everybody to the webinar and start by extending the greetings from Commissioners Sayre and Berman. Today's webinar is the first of a series of events and initiatives that the Commission and the Department are rolling out to assist market participants and other interested parties in learning about the VDR order and to be able to keep apprised of its implementation. We recognize that the order is very dense, particularly on first reading for those who haven't been an active part of the proceeding, and it can be intimidating. So we've planned a series of outreach activities to assist in making the order and its implications accessible to everyone. I want to underscore the fact that the Commission and staff are committed to an effective and efficient flow of information. To that end, on Monday, there will be a dedicated website by Monday dealing with this issue. That will be the place to go to for notices, for information about implementation actions and proceedings. We also appreciate the fact that there are many questions. We've received literally scores of questions so far. We anticipate we'll be receiving more questions during the course of the webinar today and then following. That we will be establishing an FAQ page where we will be posting and responding to questions, and if not all questions, certainly all topics that are raised. We've gotten a number of duplicate questions, as you can imagine. Two other points I want to make about today's webinar. We have a lot of slides and a lot of text on the slides, and we know that that can be dense too. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go fast to stay within the 90 minutes. However, the slides themselves and a recording of this webinar will be posted on the website I mentioned, and during the course of the presentation today, we will give you that link. And again, we'll only be able to address a few questions, but all questions will be addressed during the FAQ. And lastly, during the course of the webinar, we will be outlining future activities. These include a DPS two-day technical conference during the first week of April, where we'll be addressing some implementation issues, and the scheduling conference in May to kick off phase 2. So with that, I want to thank everybody's participation, your interest in this, and on behalf of the entire team and everybody in the department, we want to let you know that we're committed to respond as quickly as possible to all the questions that may come up. Thank you, Peter.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And as Scott noted, we do have the slides already posted, and they're available on the link that you see there at the bottom. But if you don't have the link, you can also go to the webcast page of the department's website, and there'll be a link to them there next to the link that you accessed this webinar. So here's an overview of the webinar. Before I run through this, I do want to just let you all know who I'm joined by here. In addition to Scott and myself, we have Warren Myers, Ted Kelly, Marco Padula, and David Sambang from NYSERDA. So they'll all be taking a section of the presentation here, and if you were tracking the proceeding, know that they are all very involved in this matter over the past year plus. So what you see here on the first slide is just an overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll quickly go through process, how we've gotten to this point. We'll cover some background and context, which I'll cover those first two. Ted will cover an overview of the specific provisions in the order. Then we'll hear from Warren on the Phase 1 value stack. I'll cover the CDG tranche design. Marco will cover implementation issues. You'll hear from me again on cost reduction and low-income participation, as well as VDR Phase 2 and interaction with other topics and proceedings. So intro and housekeeping, you heard some of this from Scott already, so I won't be repetitive. A link to the order here, and as Scott mentioned, we've received upwards of 60 questions, all very substantive, and we'll do our best to answer many of them during the webinar today, and we'll do so moving forward. But that's the primary email address that you can submit your questions. And then at the bottom, a link to the full proceeding for all filings. So quickly, how did we get to this point? Back in December of 2014, when the Commission adopted the Community Distributed Generation Order, they envisioned taking compensation as part of REV to a more granular level. So more accurate valuation and compensation of DER to really get at a lot of the objectives associated with our reforming the energy vision. So that was the first place that we started hearing about greater and more precise compensation for DER. We heard about it again in the net metering floating cap order in actually, those two dates should be switched. So December 2014 was the floating cap order. CDG order was July of 2015. Nonetheless, we heard early on that getting to more precise and accurate valuation and compensation for DER was a priority issue for our REV objectives. So we steadily moved in that direction with the commencement of this proceeding in December of 2015. We initiated it with several questions which we entertained responses to, and specific proposals, which we received many of in the spring and summer of last year. Moving from there, and this is something I really want to emphasize, but we adopted an informal and collaborative process of upwards of two dozen diverse and various stakeholders, and we had numerous 10+ technical and collaborative sessions where we discussed various issues having to do with net metering and valuation and compensation of DER. Just knowing how some of these conversations and debates go across the country, it was refreshing to know that people could come to the table in an earnest way and have a constructive conversation to tackle some very meaty issues. So I think New York stands apart in that regard, and something that I think the whole team is very proud of. After that collaborative, we moved to a staff report and recommendations that were issued in October of 2016. As you'll see, we received numerous comments, both initial and reply, as well as a tremendous number of public comments from interested individuals. And then March 9th, 2017, the Commission adopted its Phase 1 order. So some background and context, moving us in this direction and leading to the Commission order in March. As I noted on the last slide, the combination of the net metering floating cap order and the adoption of a CDG policy, it was coupled with the Commission's direction to staff to develop an interim methodology for more precise DER valuation and compensation. In exploring that, the Commission was very explicit in making sure that we avoided policy cliffs, but we took discrete and committed action to move beyond the net metering paradigm that's been in place in New York since 1997. There was also a recognition as we moved down this path that there would be necessary improvements in technical capabilities, especially with utility planning and operation, that would be key to unlocking more precise valuation of the DER at a granular level. Also, at the heart of our collaborative conversations were some key principles, not the least of which are principles of gradualism and predictability. And we've had those two principles sort of as our North Star as we've engaged in conversations and conceived of the recommendations that we put forth to the Commission for their consideration. As we were having our collaborative with stakeholders, we acknowledged that what we were discussing and envisioning and ultimately hoping to present to the Commission were really the first steps in this process, and that following those initial steps and a phase 1 of this proceeding, we should immediately embark on a phase 2. And so what we presented to the Commission and what the Commission adopted in early March, really is an order that establishes some very definitive foundational policies to enable implementation and the initial application of the phase 1 value of DER methodology. So what does the phase 1 order do? It takes the first step in moving beyond net metering towards more accurate valuation and compensation of DER. So you might be asking yourself, why move beyond NEM? Really, the phase 1 focused on NEM-eligible DG technologies for two primary reasons. The first being that there is a pressing need to develop compensation that can better target DG deployment to meet REV objectives and also to manage the impacts on non-participants. You might now be asking, why only NEM-eligible DG resources? Well, we, in contemplating this, felt that that was the most pressing need, and that other non-NEM eligible resources have a variety of other programs and tariffs at their disposal, and that we would have a great opportunity in phase 2 to consider their involvement in the value of DER framework. For the sake of time, I'm not gonna read these quotes about why the phase 1 order is necessary, but these are two snippets from the Commission order that I think capture the intent very well. And with that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Ted, and he's going to walk through some of the overarching policies that the Commission adopted.
So as Peter said, we're limited here to the NEM-eligible technologies. This slide shows what those technologies are. They're the technologies that are listed in the projects and technologies that are listed in the Public Service Law, Section 66J and 66L. So you have solar, wind, microhydro, farm waste, which is subject to some fueling requirements, and fuel cell, which is also subject to some fueling requirements, all of which are listed in 66J. And as well as micro-combined heat and power. All of those are limited to projects sized at 2 megawatts AC or less, except for micro-combined heat and power, which is limited to 10 kilowatts. And as Peter said, other DER technologies, including demand management, demand response or reduction, energy efficiency, and other distributed generation projects are not eligible for phase 1. However, of course, somebody with an eligible generation technology could also have energy efficiency on their site behind the same meter and still participate. It would only be standalone sites where there isn't any eligible generation that would not be eligible for phase 1. I'll note here that wind generation is subject to a bit of a special provision because it has a separate section of the Public Service Law. It's covered by 66L, where the rest are under 66J. Because of that, it has a separate statutory cap, which has not yet been reached. Therefore, wind generation projects will be put on NEM, the previously existing form of NEM, until that cap is reached in each territory. They will have the opportunity to opt into the value stack if they want to move to the value stack earlier than that. So on the next slide, we go through the types of net metering projects that currently exist in New York. There are mass market projects, which are projects that are on the site of a customer where the energy is being used, behind the same meter where the usage is. And it's a mass market project where the customer is a residential customer or a small commercial customer or small non-residential on a non-demand based rate, on a completely volumetric, billed based on completely volumetric rates. The next category is the large scale on-site. So again, that would be projects that are behind the same meter as usage, as a customer's usage, and are used to offset generate the usage at that site. The large projects would be the projects where the customer is a non-residential customer, a commercial customer often, who is on a demand-based rate or a mandatory hourly pricing rate. So therefore, the customers that wouldn't fall into the mass market category. The next category is remote net metering projects, where the generation is at one site, but it's primarily serving meters. It's primarily being used to offset the usage at meters at other sites, all owned by one customer, owned or leased by one customer. And this only applies to non-residential customers and residential customers who also own and operate farm operations at their residential site. Finally, there's community distributed generation, which, as Peter noted, was only instituted by the Commission about a year and a half ago, which is similar to remote net metering, a project that is not on the same site as significant usage, but instead injects most of its generation into the grid. Community distributed generation then uses that generation to offset the usage of a number of subscribers. Generally, there's a 10-member minimum, although there's a limited, at the same time as the value of DER order, the Commission authorized the limited waiver where everyone is located on the same property, for example, in a small apartment building. But generally, there's a 10-member minimum, and at least 60% of the project must be dedicated to serving small, so that'll generally be the same as the mass market definition above, small customers, and only up to 40% can be dedicated to serving one or more large customers. The value of DER order also clarified the status of energy storage in net metering in New York State. For projects that are in phase one, they are permitted to pair energy storage with an eligible generation technology. For mass market customers, they can put energy storage on their site and still retain the same NEM-based compensation. For larger projects, large on-site remote net meter or community distributed generation projects, they are required to be compensated based on the value stack if they're going to be pairing generation with their, if they're going to be pairing storage with their generation. Standalone storage and other storage valuation issues will be taken up in phase two. NYSERDA is also currently developing a storage plus solar program. There are some complications related to storage with the environmental credit value and mass and market transition credit, which will be discussed further later in the context of the value stack. That's an issue for implementation that staff will be making a proposal on for the further order this summer on implementation. So to manage the impacts of phase one non-participants, which, as Peter said, was one of the purposes of this proceeding, the Commission adopted a incremental net annual revenue impact ceiling of approximately 2% for each utility's residential service class. What that means is that any given residential customer should not see an increase in their bill of more than a 2% maximum in their total volumetric bill of more than 2% maximum associated with this program. That impact will be accrued as projects come online, so in some territories we may not see anywhere near that, and we certainly won't see 2% immediately. The 2% isn't a hard cap. Rather, it's used to inform megawatt allocations for the two types of projects that potentially cause net revenue impacts in the most significant way: mass market projects and CDG projects. So the 2% was used as a guide and then translated into a allocation based on utility peak demand, which provides cleaner megawatt numbers. That's 4% of the 2016 peak demand in megawatts for O&R and Con Edison, and 7% for the other utilities: Central Hudson, National Grid, NYSEG, and RG&E. In responding to some questions about how the net revenue impact was calculated, for community DG projects, it's equal to the MTC. And
MTC minus
minus the value of the distribution system value, the DRV, because that's not also paid to projects that receive the MTC. For mass market projects, it's derived by taking the estimated amount of the compensation paid in credits and subtracting all of the values that make up the value stack.
from the base retail rate.
Right, from the base retail rate, which is the estimated amount of compensation.
Right. These are all estimates for the purpose of tranching.
That's right. And the tranches will be talked about more a little later. So moving on to the next slide, The three broad categories discussed in the commission order are net energy metering, which was the pre-existing policy described in Public Service Law sections 66J and 66L, and subject to a number of commission orders over the past 20 years since it started. Then there is Phase 1 NEM, which is a limited continuation of NEM-style compensation, which I'll describe a little more fully in a moment. And then there's the value stack, which is the primary mechanism of compensation under Phase 1, and the mechanism that will be further developed through Phase 2. So the projects that stay on the pre-existing net energy metering under the statute and the relevant commission orders are projects that were interconnected or had completed construction as of March 9th, 2017, the date of the order. In order for projects to have received credit for having completed construction by that date, they must have notified the utilities by March 17th that they that those projects had been finished on March 9th. The standards are based on the standards in the standard interconnection requirements. By March 31st, utilities will submit a filing giving the total megawatt amount of systems that are eligible for this treatment. In addition, previously grandfathered remote net metering projects that had received grandfathering when the Commission moved from monetary net metering to volumetric net metering are eligible for monetary crediting for their 25-year term if they're in service by the end of 2017 or if they meet other requirements that were added in a Commission order in December 2016. All projects, including these projects, continue to be subject to rate design modifications. The next category is Phase 1 NEM. Compensation under Phase 1 NEM is identical to compensation under the pre-existing NEM policy. The main difference is that projects under Phase 1 NEM will be subject to a compensation term length of 20 years. After 20 years, they'll be moved to the then applicable mechanism. So projects will certainly not be required to disconnect after 20 years, nor will they stop receiving compensation for energy they inject into the grid. Rather, they'll be required to move to whatever is the most current then, possibly some improved form of the value stack or possibly something else. 20 years is obviously a little hard to predict. Projects may also choose to opt into a value stack or similar future mechanism before that date, and we expect that as more values get added, the value stack or subsequent method may be a very attractive proposition, and many of these projects may decide to opt in before that 20-year period has passed. The Commission did clarify that for projects that were in development and therefore had contracts signed between various parties prior to the date of the order, if those contracts contemplated a longer term than 20 years, developers or customers are permitted to come in with a petition to the Commission requesting that they receive extended extended Phase 1 NEM reflecting that longer contract term. And we certainly encourage for administrative simplicity and for being able to answer those petitions as quickly as possible, that joint petitions be filed where possible. For example, that a developer who has multiple projects in that category file one petition for as many of the projects as possible, and that developers even file joint petitions with each other to the extent possible. So a couple of other minor differences between Phase 1 NEM and the pre-existing NEM is that for projects other than mass market projects, so for all the large on-site remote net metering and community DG projects, projects receiving Phase 1 NEM are required to be equipped with utility metering capable of recording net hourly consumption and injection. While this won't specifically be used for the billing of those projects, it will provide further experience with and information about the impact of these projects on the system, and also will allow the inclusion of these projects in some of the environmental reporting and compliance programs to a greater degree than was previously possible. In addition, while prior to the value of DER order, some projects under net metering are and will continue to receive checks at the end of the year for any excess credits based on the avoided cost rate. No projects under Phase 1 NEM will receive checks. They all are able to just carry over their credits, able to and required to carry over their credits. Except for CDG sponsors, there's no limit to the amount of time any customer can carry over their credit. So members of a CDG can carry it over for an unlimited length of time, as can large on-site remote net metering and mass market projects, until the end of their compensation period. So that's 20 years for Phase 1 NEM.
Ted, if I could just interrupt you for a second. I've gotten 1 or 2 emails saying that there's been problems viewing the audio or viewing the video and hearing the audio. We're seeing things loud and clear, so maybe check your own connection. If you need to download the slides, again, you can go to the department's webcast page and download the slides directly from there. In terms of audio, we're recording this, and the audio should be clear on the recording that we post next week. Back to you, Ted.
So I was told that Scott came through clearer than I was, so I've switched to the mic that he was using, and we'll see if that helps at all.
You want to go back and correct any of your former checks?
I don't think so. Sorry, so back to the slides. So Phase 1 NEM, the next question to answer is who is eligible for Phase 1 NEM? For this, it's broken into 2 categories, mass market projects and other projects, large remote net metering or community DG. For on-site mass market projects, all projects installed or fully interconnected or constructed after the date of the order and interconnected before January 1st, 2020 will be eligible for Phase 1 NEM. This is to do both to metering needs and to ensure that the more developed mass market rooftop market is able to continue. There are megawatt allocation limits for mass market Phase 1 NEM in order to stay under that 2% impact discussed earlier. However, those won't lead to any immediate cutoff. Upon hitting 85% of an allocation, notice will be provided by the utility to the Commission, and the Commission will determine what action is appropriate. However, even if the 100% ceiling is reached before the Commission has taken further action, projects that are interconnected will continue to be interconnected based on Phase 1 NEM and receive that 20-year term up until the Commission takes further action. So only projects after the Commission's action will be subject to a new form of compensation. Listed on this slide are the megawatt allocations by utility to mass market, which were intended to ensure that current and expected rates are able to continue during the relevant period. So next is large projects, which were under development before the date of the order. There's an opportunity for Phase 1 NEM during a 90 business day window from the date of the order. Projects that have made it that within that 90-day window, projects that either prior to the date of the order or within the 90 business day window following the date of the order make a payment for at least 25% of their interconnection upgrade costs as developed in their CSER, or for projects that don't require upgrade payments, projects that actually execute their final interconnection contract. Those projects will be able to move into Phase 1 NEM with a limited exception I'll discuss in just a moment. For remote net metered projects and for large-scale on-site projects, there is no limit. The exception is for CDG projects, which are subject to a capacity limit, which is the capacity for Tranche 0. That limit will be shown later in this slide deck. So for projects that aren't able to get either NEM or Phase 1 NEM, either because they're not ready to make their 25% payment or ready to make that payment within 90 business days of the order, or because they're developed in the future, or because the capacity allocation for CDG has been exceeded, compensation will be based on the Phase 1 value stack. Projects on regular NEM or Phase 1 NEM also will be permitted to opt into the value stack if they wish to by informing their utility, and that will be a non-reversible one-time opt-in. Compensation under the value stack will be based on monetary crediting for net hourly injections. That's injections of power into the utility grid. On-site usage will continue to simply result in less usage being metered and a direct reduction in the billed kilowatt hours or kilowatts for demand purposes, rather than any sort of crediting. The amount of the monetary crediting are based on the specific calculations of the values of the exported generation, generally in the hour. Some of those values are going to be the same for every hour, whereas some will vary by the hour. We'll go further into that when we discuss the elements of the value stack. Projects compensated by the value stack will be subject to a compensation term length of 25 years, after which, as with the Phase 1 NEM projects after the 20 years, they'll be moved on to the then applicable compensation mechanism. Because this is a new method of compensation that includes a little more uncertainty than the existing mechanisms for developers who aren't familiar with it, the Commission determined that the 25-year period was appropriate for this rather than the 20-year period of Phase 1 NEM. As with Phase 1 NEM for pre-existing projects in development with pre-existing contracts, they will be able to petition the Commission for a longer period. The credit carryover will be dealt with similarly to the Phase 1 NEM credit carryover in that it's unlimited within that 25-year term for all customers other than CDG sponsors. So in terms of project eligibility for the value stack, community distributed generation will be on that method of compensation through a series of declining tranches that will be discussed later. Remote net metering projects, as long as they weren't previously grandfathered, will be eligible for that. And if they are previously grandfathered, they are permitted to leave their grandfathering, forfeit their grandfathering, and opt into it just as any other customer is. Large on-site projects also will be put on it, and mass market customers will be permitted to opt into it, although they won't be automatically put onto it until either January 1st, 2020 or further Commission action based on a ceiling being reached. So, as mentioned, all projects will be allowed to opt into the value stack tariff. They can do it at any time on notice to the utility, but once they've opted in, they won't then be able to return to their previous compensation mechanism. CDG and mass market projects will be placed in the currently active tranche and receive an MTC based on that, a market transition credit based on that tranche, as discussed later, and their capacity will count towards that tranche's capacity allocation. Being compensated based on the value stack does require a utility meter capable of recording and reporting net hourly exports. So that means for mass market customers who don't yet have any kind of AMI installed, they may need to arrange with the utility to get that metering installed in order to opt into the value stack, and that may result in some costs on the customer in installing that metering, depending on the utility's policies and AMI status. As noted below, many large DG projects are already required to be equipped with metering that meets these standards. For new projects, metering must be installed at installation. Where a generation project is being installed at an already metered site, in particular with large-scale on-site projects, advanced hourly metering must be installed as soon as practical, but the project can come online before that metering is installed if necessary. Next slide. So with regard to the market transition credit, which has been mentioned several times, my microphone's being switched again. I guess the second one wasn't any better or was worse. The purpose of the market transition credit is based on the fact that initial estimates of the value stack are, for most projects, lower than what the value of NEM credits to mass market customers, which includes the credits that mass market subscribers would receive from community distributed generation projects. For that reason, a market transition credit was authorized by the Commission for mass market customers participating in CDG projects or on-site mass market customers that opt in as noted. This avoids market disturbances in the transition away from NEM, especially in the very new CDG market. It also reflects values that haven't yet been identified and calculated, including elements of the distribution system value that have not yet been fully identified and calculated. As noted, there are certain cases where the MTC is not appropriate and therefore won't be applied. In particular, there are the large on-site and R&M projects, which will be better off in general under the value stack than they would be under NEM, at least for the R&M projects that are on volumetric crediting. This is because under NEM, those projects generally receive compensation only based on the energy and capacity value of the power, essentially similar to the avoided cost, although it varies somewhat based on their exact service class and utility. Whereas under the value stack, they'll receive compensation for those elements as well as for the environmental value for the power, as well as for the distribution system value of the power. For CDG projects, the large members on the CDG project are not entitled to a market transition credit because they similarly will be better off under the value stack. For that reason, a CDG project will receive a market transition credit proportional to its percentage of mass market off-takers, subscribers. So the percentage of the project that is, in terms of output, that is dedicated to mass market subscribers will receive an MTC. So for the example here with the 70% and 30%, note that wouldn't be in terms of number of customers. So for example, if a project had a project might have 70 residential off-takers who each take 1% of the project, and only one large commercial off-taker who takes the other 30%. In that case, it would get a 70% MTC as noted here. The MTC, estimated MTCs are provided in an appendix to the commission order. The MTC will be calculated using the mechanisms detailed in the commission order by each utility and set one time following the issuance of the order. And it will apply for the full 25 years for each customer. And it's calculated by subtracting the estimated value stack from the existing base retail rate. So as noted, under both the value stack and Phase 1 NEM, credits will be carried over to the following billing period, and there won't be a payout at any time until the end of the compensation term. For CDG sponsors, they have a 2-year period after the end of any annual period to allocate excess credits, and they must fully allocate credits prior to that to the extent that their customers have need. They can only carry over credits when their customers have no further need at the end of an annual period. The order also addresses the treatment of renewable energy certificates generated by projects that are receiving compensation under NEM, Phase 1 NEM, or the value stack. NEM customers may receive non-transferable RECs to use for voluntary compliance purposes or other purposes they wish if they don't have an RPS or RES contract. Phase 1 NEM projects can also receive non-transferable RECs. For CDG projects, the non-transferable RECs will go to the utility by default to reduce the cost of the utility for complying with the clean energy standard and thereby reduce the impact on non-participants. However, CDG projects are permitted to elect as a whole to receive the RECs, to receive non-transferable RECs for their customers instead. The order notes that projects receiving the value stack or Phase 1 NEM are not eligible to participate in the Clean Energy Standard, Renewable Energy Standard Tier 1 solicitation. For projects receiving the value stack, they have two options. They either can elect to go with the default interconnecting LSE option, in which case the utility receives non-transferable RECs for use in complying with the Clean Energy Standard, and customers receive environmental compensation in the value stack for those RECs. Customers may instead opt into the customer retention option. This must be done at or before the time of interconnection. There'll be standardized forms developed for that, and it is a permanent election. In that case, they will not receive the payment in the value stack, but they will receive non-transferable RECs, again, to use for their own retirement or voluntary compliance obligations. Customers who register their project in the New York Generation Attribute Tracking System, NIGATS, and provide generation data to it will be able to receive one non-transferable REC for each megawatt hour of generation reported, including both generation consumed behind the meter and generation injected into the utility system. I'll note here that there will be a NIGATS webinar conducted by NYSERDA in the near future. I believe that's scheduled for April 13th at, I believe, 1 to 4 p.m. And information for that, I believe, is on NYSERDA's website and certainly will also be included on our VDR page once that's up and running. And with that, I believe I'll pass it on to Warren to discuss the components of the value stack.
Thank you, Ted. So we're on slide 22. The value stack, which basically covers pages 94 through 130 of the order. A couple of process or administrative notes before I get started into the layers of the value stack. And this clarification is based on a number of the questions we've received. It's clear that people that just jump to the table in Appendix A or forgot what they read on page 94 by the time they got there, there was some confusion about what the table in Appendix A represented. Those are numbers that provide an example of how the one portion of compensation is calculated, the Market Transition Credit, or MTC. It is just an example, and when I get to the MTC slide, I'll talk about that some more. But those values in the table in Appendix A are not what anybody is going to necessarily be paid or credited. Those are an example based on 3-year averages for most of the values, historic, in the table. And as I go through the value stack, I'll note how each layer of the value stack will actually be credited as we go through. So don't overemphasize the actual numbers that show up in the table in Appendix A. It was there for 2 reasons. One, to provide a concrete example of how the utilities are to construct the MTCs, which they'll be filing May 1st. And the second purpose was to give us estimates of the MTCs for the tranching approach that Ted referred to and that Peter will get into a little bit later. That was one process note. Another administrative note is that all these elements of the value stack, we've recognized that there's an implementation need for some sort of transparent and available location where these values are posted or attainable. And that's something we and the stakeholders need to work on in the next month or two. So I realize some of these elements are on the web for some utilities. They're not available for some other utilities. And that's something we need to work on as we get to the implementation that then the Commission will take up later this summer. Let's see. I guess the last point before I get going, if you look at slide 22, you noticed one of the changes the Commission order made to, if you've been participating in this process, all of the value stack graphs that I've been giving you, you've been used to the random Crayola crayon package approach. Apparently we've shifted to the Desert Southwest palette, and that's what we'll be using for the value stack, and I hope you aren't colorblind, but we're told this is a better way to present it by people who know what they're doing. So the value stack. The value stack is what in Phase 1 NEM-eligible projects will be credited for each kilowatt hour that the project injects into the system as measured by hourly metering. There are, for Phase 1 at least, 4 or 5 elements, depending on your project. Largely, they are day-ahead LBMP, the energy component, which is going to be the dynamic component of the value stack. There's an MTC, which we'll describe later, which is going to be an extremely stable element of the value stack. It will be set for a project once, and it will remain at its level for 25 years. The environmental benefit will be a very stable element. It will be set once at the interconnection time of each project and will stay stable for 25 years. The capacity element, there are a couple of options, 3 actually, and that's going to be at least as stable as it is under net energy metering, and we'll discuss what those options are. And then the avoided D element, which has 2 components to it, the demand reduction value, which is basically utility-wide, a lower value, and then an additional value for high-value areas of the distribution system, and we'll discuss each of these in turn. Next slide, slide 23. So the first element is the energy value. It starts with the wholesale zonal LBMP from the ISO. It gets, at the distribution level, grossed up for avoidable distribution losses. The level of those distribution losses will depend on where the project connects, at what voltage level it interconnects to the distribution system. It's going to be very analogous to what mandatory hourly pricing customers pay for their energy. Every day, the ISO issues a day ahead for the 24 hours LBMP numbers that the utilities then will gross up for distribution losses. And again, we'll have to talk about how those can be obtained each day by each project. The next element is capacity. This one was discussed a lot during all the stakeholder meetings, and what the commission decided to do based on recommendations from staff was to provide an element that is more stable than the actual value that each LSC receives necessarily and how each LSC is charged for ICAP, but it's largely based on the charges that retail rate customers get for the ICAP portion of their bill. And the commission accepted a few options. The default option is to take, once in the implementation period, we decide which retail rate class is load best represents the DER, the eligible phase 1 DER production load. The ICAP monthly charge rate for that retail class will be used to credit all eligible value stack receivers for that utility. Those rates are set each month, and again, we'll have to have per kilowatt hour. So that default option, you would know what the kilowatt hour rate is each month, and that's essentially the same kilowatt hour rate you get credited for under current NEM if you're serving that retail class. The other option that the commission accepted, a voluntary option, would be to essentially have the utilities determine for that retail rate class if those costs were instead collected from retail customers over 460 summer hours as defined in the order. That would be a higher rate per kilowatt hour, but would only be available for those 460 summer hours. Set that price for every summer ahead of time, and then after the summer is over, based on what the eligible project injected for those 460 hours, that would be the compensation they would receive. So if they opted for that approach, they would get a price that gives them a greater incentive to be available during the summer. And then the third option, which is not an option for the dispatchable, so-called dispatchable technologies, is to basically be credited the same way MHP customers are charged for capacity, which is to set their ICAP capacity tag based on what their output level is during the peak hour of a given summer, and that quantity, kilowatts, is used for the subsequent year and credited for whatever the spot ICAP price grossed up for retail for both losses and reserves, and the methodologies are described in MHP tariffs for those technologies. On page 25, we discuss E, the environmental value. As I said, this is going to be very stable. what the commission order accepted was the higher of, for those technologies that are eligible, the higher of the latest Tier 1 rec procurement price posted by NYSERDA, which most recently was $24.24 per megawatt hour, or 2.424 cents per kilowatt hour, or the social cost of carbon minus the RGGI value, if that is higher. And we've determined that at least presently the Tier 1 rec price is higher. So any eligible project that would receive the value stack before the next NYSERDA procurement would be set at 2.424 cents per kilowatt hour for the 25 years of the value stack crediting. Okay. Slide 26. There is an option under the environmental credit. I believe Ted mentioned this already. It's if rather than receiving that 2.4 cent credit, it is more valuable or desirable to you to essentially keep your environmental value and retire it for whatever certificating or other purposes you have in mind. That's doable. The slide describes basically the process. It's intended to be painless. It's as if you were buying back that credit, but the utilities should be able to hand it with just some sort of check off at the time of interconnection. You can decide that that's what you want, and you will just see the net value stack value. The more difficult, next page 27, we'll talk about the more difficult element, the most difficult probably element of the value stack, and the commission described this in good detail in the order. Is avoided D. Now this slide is just about one part of it. That's the so-called DRV, which I described as a utility-wide value. For the portion of CDG crediting that gets the value stack, that gets the MTC, this value is irrelevant because it's subsumed in the MTC value. The MTC credit is calculated without subtracting any DRV values, so it's essentially part of the MTC credit. For the portion of the kilowatt hours coming out of a CDG project, or a project that doesn't get the MTC at all but is still eligible for the value stack, then they would receive this DRV value that's available for a utility service territory wide. The values will come in the May 1st filing. And then, of course, we'll go through the stakeholder commenting process, and the commission will make a decision on that sometime later this summer. The commission did lay out certain restrictions on how those would be calculated. Basically, they accepted staff's proposal to concentrate those values in the top 10 peak hours for a given utility each year. The dollar per kilowatt year value would be set based on marginal cost studies, which the utilities have just filed. They filed prior to this, but we asked them to file them again under this docket, so you'll find them in DMM under this docket number. And they, by May 1st, the utilities are to take those marginal cost studies and de-average them into the lower DRV value, and then a value that would apply to high-value congested areas, so-called LSRV values, which are described on the next page. And so we'll be going through reviewing those filings May 1st, and thereafter. For DRV, the utilities will update those every 3 years. Basically, they're based on the output in those top 10 highest usage hours, so you won't know those until after we've seen what the summer was like. And The dollar per kilowatt year value, of course, will be set ahead of time. So you know what the price is. You just won't know what your production is until after I'd say the summer period is where most of these top 10 hours are. Updated every 3 years. The LSRV value is also to be filed May 1st, subject to commission approval later in the summer. The utilities have to identify where the high-value areas are, and what the megawatt restrictions are for those areas. This is one place where we're going to have to be careful to coordinate between these tariff crediting values and the megawatts allowed underneath it, and the megawatts under so-called non-wires alternative procurements under DSIPs and other processes, because these, as you know, these kind of values are dependent on the congestion in an area. Once you relieve the congestion, the high value is no longer there, so it's only available for a certain number of megawatts. If we satisfy, I'm just going to pick a number, 10 of those megawatts through a non-wire alternative, and there was a need of 30 megawatts, then we would need to update the availability under the tariff down to 20 megawatts. We'll have to come up with whatever the best system is, but it would have to be dynamic, reflecting both what's going on under the tariff and what's going on under the non-wires alternative procedures, because otherwise you can end up sending a high price signal that actually makes the system worse instead of better. Once you get access to and you are determined eligible to receive that credit, you, according to the commission order, will continue to receive that credit for 10 years. So that was a balancing of the need for dynamic, but also the need to the fact that you're competing against long-term assets. And so 10 years for each project that happens to get it. We just have to be careful about the number of megawatts that get it. The important point is the LSRV, unlike the DRV, can be received in addition to an MTC. My last slide, I guess, is slide 29, and that's all about the MTC. The market transition credit was intended to be a transition mechanism only. And so it is being set as one number for each utility for each mass market service class. That is one number for SC1 for each utility and one number for small commercial non-demand customers for each utility. It's not going to be updated during phase one. It's not going to be tweaked for any reason. The only thing that happens to the MTC is it changes. It lowers as you go from tranche 1 to tranche 2 to tranche 3. And the other change a project might see is if their mix of mass market versus non-mass market load changes, then the percentage of the KWH that receives an MTC credit will change. But these numbers are going to be provided by the utilities on May 1st. We'll review them, discuss them, and then they will be approved by the PSC sometime later in the summer. The numbers you see in the appendix, again, were based on a 3-year average, and that's what the MTCs that the utilities will be filing will mostly be based on 3-year average of every element except for the tariff, the per kilowatt hour delivery tariff element, which is going to be set at the effective level at the time of the commission order. So those 3-year averages, if you look at the table in Appendix A, some of the questions we've gotten, and say, gee, when I look at my bill, my NYMO commodity charge is 12 cents a kilowatt hour, but you say it's only 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, A, the reason for that is that the number in Appendix A was based on a 3-year average. Two, that doesn't mean you're getting cheated out of 2 cents per kilowatt hour, by the way. It was only to be used for calculating the MTC. So actually, the lower that average is, the higher the MTC credit is. So again, the table is just an example. What's really important is what the utilities file, and it's being used, the historical numbers, the 3-year average, are only being used to set the MTCs that stay fixed for 25 years per project. So the May 1 filing is important to review, and those might be the work papers that you should be most interested in my opinion. Just to finish up, the tranching, the tranche 1 MTCs were designed to equal the difference between what was called base retail rates in Appendix A and the value stack in Appendix A. Again, base retail rates and value stack were both based on 3-year averages except for that one element. Tranche 2 was designed to calculate the MTC that delivers a total compensation, a total crediting that is 5% less than Tranche 1, and Tranche 3 the same but 10% less than Tranche 1. And with that, I'll throw it over to Peter to talk about tranching.
Great. Thanks, Warren. I'll risk it and use this mic. So somebody can email me here and let me know if I'm not coming through. So we're halfway through, or probably more than halfway through, and I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that we do appreciate that we probably have a lot of people that are listening in that have varying levels of understanding of what we've been through over the past year and a half. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that what we're providing here today is an overview of the commission order that was adopted in March. We have a full appreciation that there's a lot of details here, and this won't be the last time you hear from us, whether it be through information provided on our webpage with frequently asked questions, or I know our colleagues at NYSERDA are working on a daily basis to understand how this is impacting the clean energy market, particularly the solar market. So I just wanted to take a moment and recognize that, because we have gotten a lot of questions here that are all across the board, both very general to very specific. So appreciate everybody's hanging in there with the details, and we'll certainly be answering your questions the best we can. So moving into the CDG tranche design, again, the tranches were established specifically for CDG projects. Warren just mentioned the various tranches that will be available under this paradigm. So outside of the tranches for the MTC, there is an initial tranche for CDG projects that we're calling Tranche 0. It's eligible for CDG projects to come in the next 90 business days if they pay 25% of their interconnection costs or execute an interconnection agreement if those costs are not applicable, and subject to capacity within the Tranche 0. So those projects would be eligible for volumetric NEM compensation for a period of 20 years. If any capacity is left in Tranche 0 after the 90 days, that's when that capacity is moved to Tranche 1. Tranche 1 is the initial value stack tranche, which is set to be the equivalent compensation of NEM, utilizing the combination of the value stack plus the market transition credit. And then you've got Tranche 2, which steps down to 95% NEM equivalent, and then Tranche 3, 90% NEM equivalent. The bullets at the bottom there indicating that the Phase 1 net metering for all projects, not just CDG, but all projects under the Phase 1 NEM, as well as the CDG projects for the Tranche 0 NEM, will be volumetric crediting. Tranches 1 through 3 will employ the monetary crediting, as Ted reviewed earlier. Again, placement in a tranche is based on when a project has paid at least 25% of its interconnection upgrade costs. If there's no costs associated with the project, execution of the utility interconnection agreement. When does that happen? Timestamp of the payment or timestamp of executing the agreement. So this is an illustration of showing the step down from tranches. Tranche 1 on the left, 2 in the middle, 3 on the right. Full NEM, 95% NEM, 90% NEM. Again, this is just purely illustrative to show the step down. What these stacks don't include are any value of D, the DRV, that would be compensating those customers, the proportion of customers in a CDG project not eligible for the MTC. So that's not reflected here. The other thing that's not reflected is the eligibility for the other value of D piece, the LSRV. So here are the tranches. Again, these tranches were derived using the 2% net revenue impact envelope that the Commission directed and approved. That was used as the guidepost. The actual megawatt numbers here are based on peak demand as previously described. So 2016 peak demand, and as was previously indicated on a slide, depending on the utility, it was either 4% peak demand or 7% peak demand. And those, the selection of what percentage was done so according to the 2% net revenue impact envelope. So you can see the top row is the total incremental CDG megawatts for all the tranches, and then it's broken down by tranche 01, tranche 2, and tranche 3. Again, a reminder, the tranche 01 is combined. Tranche 0 is open immediately for CDG projects to be developed under NEM within the 90-day period. If there's remaining capacity in the tranche 0 after the 90 days, it would move to tranche 1. Upon completing filling of a tranche, you step down to the next one. So, how many projects are currently eligible? We asked the utilities to file how many projects had either paid the 25% or executed an interconnection agreement. We asked for that, I think, within maybe 7 days of the order, but we've been working with them daily to get real-time updates, which we'll be providing. I've listed them on the next slide, which we'll go through, and then we'll also be posting to our website. The utilities were directed to be providing real-time updates on tranche progress, so we're in the process of figuring out the most efficient and practical way to do that. In the meantime, we'll be working with them directly to get their updated numbers, and again, be providing those on the website. When a tranche is full, the utilities are required to notify the Commission, make a filing saying that the tranche is full and we're moving to the next tranche. Similar to the mass market allocation, upon reaching 85% of a utility's total megawatt allocation for all tranches, the utility will notify the Commission, and the Commission will take up any consideration that they deem appropriate. Until there's Commission action, projects that become eligible for CDG and the MTC tranche structure will be placed into tranche 3. So here's the updated tranche status as of yesterday. You can see that the similar to the slide 2 back, you've got the allocations listed in each tranche. The additional row here is what the utilities have reported as being the megawatts that are currently eligible for that tranche. So in the case of Central Hudson, you'll see their allocation in tranche 01 was 39 megawatts. They've gotten 26 in as of yesterday. O&R was 23 in Tranche 01. They filled that with the projects that they have in their queue that meet the eligibility requirements. And so they've moved on to Tranche 2. They had enough that met the eligibility requirements for Tranche 2 and have subsequently moved on to Tranche 3. And so on and so forth. The orange box indicates which of the tranches in which utilities are currently closed, and the utilities have filed letters into the docket notifying as such. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marco, and he's going to walk through a couple slides of implementation aspects on value of DER, and then you'll hear me again.
Good afternoon, it's Marco Padula, and I'm going to walk through some of the very important implementation issues and some of the ways that we're going to try to maximize the stakeholder input and maximize the transparency to the details behind much of the implementation. As you know, the order from May 9th set out a lot of the policy direction, but there's some very important implementation pieces. So, and we've designed that, the Commission has designed that through requiring the utility to make a May 1st filing that describes the implementation of what's laid out in the order. And in order to inform that, there will be technical conferences on April 5th and 6th. And those are really, again, I'll repeat, meant to get input to inform the filings that the utility makes, in addition to inform the potential staff report regarding the cost reduction initiatives. And those are what we have said will be discussed on day 2 of the technical conferences. Following the May 1st filing, there'll be a full public comment period of the filings. In addition, we would envision additional meetings, additional stakeholder input meetings where we can discuss a lot of the details, with the ultimate goal of bringing those implementation proposals to the Commission as early as August. So a good chunk of the implementation proposal is the value of D, as Warren had laid out when he discussed the LSRV and the DRV. We recognize that the utilities are at various stages of being able to calculate all of the potential values of the distribution system value. There are a lot of work to be done, a lot of details to be discussed. But we start by having the utilities file the most recent EMCO studies. They were all filed yesterday, and they're all available on our website. This will be followed by very specific DRV and LSRV values in the May 1 filings. In addition, within 45 days, the Commission is requiring utilities to file explicit work plans and timelines for developing more locational granular prices. And I describe this as really building off of the DSIP plans, but providing more detail in terms of schedule and work plan. Lastly, the last bullet, you see the requirement to develop an optional utility fee-based portfolio service for DERs to essentially mitigate the risk of obtaining the distribution relief value, and that's another requirement for the utilities to file. So the tech conference will be held here in Albany on the 5th and 6th. The agenda is available at the website link that you see on the slide, and the utilities will make presentations on very specific aspects. The DRV, LSRV, cost recovery and allocation of each of the value stack components, discussion of the ICAP value, how it's calculated and recovered, and also you'll see the market transition credits will be presented, the calculation, and I hope at least preliminary values by the utilities will be presented. Great opportunity for parties to have open discussion of those, and the metering requirements. And we do plan that if that day has to go into day 2. We have set aside the morning of day 2 to continue discussions of the utility presentations. And the afternoon of day 2 will be a staff-facilitated consultation of ways to reduce, eliminate, or mitigate market barriers, and some of the topics are listed there on this slide. In a little more detail as to what we expect the May 1 filings to have, the May 1 utility implementation proposals. They'll have very specific calculations of and compensation methodology for the DRV. Again, for this phase, it'll be based on the MCO studies that have been filed. There'll be very specific identification and compensation for the LSRV, along with the megawatt caps and specific geographic locations. Methods for and values of the installed capacity approaches, those 2 approaches that Warren had described earlier. And the need for the identification of the average generation profiles that will be used for capacity and DRV compensation for the first year project's operation. As Warren had said earlier, you really don't know that compensation until after the period goes by, so there's a requirement to assume a certain average generation profile for the first year that will then be reconciled the following year. The cost allocation and recovery methods for each of the value stack components that will be presented in the May 1 filing, along with the proposed accounting transactions and rate-making treatment, and the utility bill management processes for actually allocating the bill credits. Lastly, we'll see draft tariffs for the value stack, including the application of those components along with the MTC calculations to different CDG configurations. I'll just repeat again that we're really trying to get the most open and transparent process to develop these implementation proposals, so we really hope that you all participate to the maximum extent possible. I'll pass it back to Peter.
Thanks, Marco. So before we get to this longer-term implementation of Phase 1 that Marco just went through, there are some near-term implementation aspects that the utilities have been directed to comport with. So that's what's listed on this slide. I already mentioned that we had asked them to report on the number of CDG projects that had paid 25% of interconnection costs or executed an interconnection agreement. That was what that chart was showing earlier. Marco just mentioned that yesterday the utilities filed the most recent marginal cost of service studies and work papers. I believe Ted mentioned earlier that by March 31st, the utilities will be reporting a final megawatt capacity of all interconnected and grandfathered projects, those that completed construction by the date of the order, and they'll report that by March 31st. So again, those are the projects that were developed under the historical net metering program, the compensation term, the volumetric net metering credit for the life of the system. On number 4, the utilities will also be filing tariff leaves for Phase 1 NEM. These will be effective April 1st. So the Phase 1 NEM is, again, eligible for a limited period of time, the 90-day period for CDG projects, remote net metering projects, and large-scale projects. And they've got the 90-day period to meet the 25% interconnection cost payment or execute an interconnection agreement. And again, the CDG is limited by the capacity of that initial tranche 0 for CDG to be developed under volumetric NEM. Mass market is also eligible for this tariff. As Ted mentioned earlier, there'll be a period subject to the megawatt allocations in each utility service territory, but this will be available until January 1st, 2020, and the compensation term length for projects under Phase 1 NEM is 20 years. I believe Marco also described that the utilities will be coming in and filing an explicit work plan and timeline for unbundling values to help with our pursuit of granular pricing for DER. They'll do this within 45 days. And I've already touched on sort of the real-time updates that'll be necessary both for the mass market projects and their specific megawatt allocation, as well as the CDG tranches. The link there at the bottom is a link to the full value of DER docket. I believe somebody mentioned earlier we'll also be establishing a dedicated value of DER page, and that'll be up next week. We'll find the best way to communicate and spread the word about the link to that, but it'll be prominently displayed on the department's website. So if you go to the homepage, you shouldn't have a problem finding it. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left and a few more slides. So what else is in the commission order from March 9th? The commission recognized that there are a lot of efforts to see clean energy in the state thrive, and part of that is finding ways outside of compensation mechanisms to help drive down costs and achieve scale. And so the commission directed staff to consider some cost reduction initiatives here in the near term. So those are listed on this slide. They include considering project size, allowing projects larger than 2 megawatts AC to participate in the VDR program. This could achieve lower per megawatt cost via economies of scale. Interconnection costs have been an issue that a lot of parties have been addressing over the past couple of years. The commission adopted an initial cost sharing framework, I guess you would say, for helping to accommodate or address some of those costs, and there'll be additional steps to investigate ways to improve that cost-sharing mechanism. Cost containment of interconnection costs, the commission contemplated that NYSERDA and staff would work together in tracking costs and providing recommendations to help bring down costs, address transparency, and align costs with industry standards. Our friends at NYSERDA, who are great with education and outreach, will be not only helping to educate folks on this order, but also looking to reduce costs through municipal outreach and education efforts on permitting and zoning and tax exemption laws here in the state. CDG, customer maintenance and operation, the commission asked us to look at ways to better facilitate the customer experience with CDG, whether that's exploring communication options or exploring on-bill mechanisms and other utility services for CDG customer transactions. And finally, they urged staff and NYSERDA to continue to think about ways that the New York Green Bank and New York Sun programs can again be driving CDG and DER to scale while reducing costs. Another main tenet that I know the commission spoke to during their March 9th session and also spent quite a bit of time in the order talking about is how to address low-income participation in DER and CDG specifically. So this is something that is access to clean energy and affordable energy in general have been core tenets of the Commission's REV agenda, and that's no exception here. So there's a couple specific provisions that the Commission has asked staff to look into in consultation with the utilities and other interested stakeholders. The first is contemplation of an interzonal CDG credit program. As it stands now, to participate in a CDG program, you need to be located in the same service territory as that project and also within the same load zone. This contemplates lifting of those restrictions so that a customer in, say, New York City could participate in a project located outside of Con Ed in the particular load zone. So that'll be contemplated moving forward. I know that NYSERDA has their low to moderate income solar programs that they continue to think about how to broaden access to solar and what programs that they can put forth to help encourage and incentivize that participation. So in addition to looking at green bank opportunities, I know that the staff over at NYSERDA is also looking at the potential of a program focused specifically on CDG for LMI customers. The third bullet there, as we look at implementation of phase one, we've also been directed to consider design options for CDG projects that comprise a majority of low-income off-takers. So all of this is really wrapped together since the CDG order back in July of I guess 2015. There's been a low-income stakeholder collaborative, and so that collaborative will be continuing here and working with the Value of DER team and other interested stakeholders and the utilities to put together a low-income proposal due later this year. All right, I'm running out of time, but I'm going to get through. Value of DER Phase 2. So we will be having a scheduling conference in May of 2017. The bullets here really run through a couple of the concepts and aspects that the Commission expects staff to contemplate and take on in the Phase 2, whether it's consideration of rate design elements or consideration of network access charges, improving the value stack under phase 1, contemplating the components, how we can be more precise, better refined, application of value of DER to more projects, technologies, and arrangements. And then also, making sure that we can understand the transition for mass market projects beginning in January 2020. The Commission expects us to come back with recommendations by the end of 2018, I believe it is. But if there's issues or aspects that are ripe for their consideration beforehand, they certainly expect us to be presenting those. All right, and I'll just quickly run through the interaction of this proceeding with other topics and proceedings here at the Commission. So I'm realizing there's a lot of acronyms here that aren't spelled out, and I've got 1 minute left, so I'll just run through this quickly. So the utility distributed system implementation plans, that'll be where we really look for increased functionality from the utilities as the distributed system platform provider. These will be very important functionality and capabilities for achieving more granular pricing of DER. DER oversight and consumer protection, staff's been directed to file a white paper within 30 days, and the Commission contemplates consideration of DER oversight provisions in conjunction with implementation of Phase 1 this summer. The benefit cost analysis handbooks that the utilities have filed, the Commission has asked staff to plan to engage with stakeholders on these handbooks over the coming year, and the low-income CDG collaborative I mentioned on the last slide. So that brings us exactly to 3:30, 90-minute webinar, exactly as planned. I know we got probably upwards of 75, 80 questions. We certainly hope that a lot of them were addressed during the 90 minutes here, but certainly appreciate that many of them were not. As Scott mentioned at the beginning, we will be doing our darndest to address those and be putting a frequently asked question sheet together. But don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call, or for efficiency purposes, send your emails to the email address listed on this page. We expect that the webinar recording will be available on that link next week, and the slides are already posted and available. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and we'll be talking soon. Thanks very much.